simple snake can. I always find that you have better luck with at least 3 snakes in this, and it's a fun gag. When you pop it, however, don't make the mistake of shooting this into the audience. If you do, they'll be playing with these. If you can.
McDonald's lost media gets freaky real quick, but recently, some really freaky lost media has been found. These are the lost McDonald's tapes, featuring live recorded shows, training videos, and multiple unreleased bloopers from commercials. Not only are we going to review these puppies, but we're also going to do our best to explain what we currently know about these tapes. And trust me, it's quite a hell of a rabbit hole and goes well beyond what I own. Before we move on, I want to give a big thank you to the eBay seller Zeville, who not only provided the tapes for me, but also gave me some interesting information and insight, which helped research this video. Also, just for a quick recap for anyone who is newer to the lost media scene, I thought it would be a little interesting to kind of talk about the previous bigger searches in lost media when it comes to McDonald's. There's quite a lot, so I'm just going to go over the ones that are, in my opinion, the most notable in lost media. One of the OG cases of lost media for McDonald's undoubtedly goes to the 2015 classic Legend of McDonald Lock. Back in the late 90s to early 2000s, the McDonald's company made a franchise called The Wacky Adventures of McDonald, where Ronald and a few of his friends go on, you guessed it, wacky adventures, with each episode having its own different theme and location. The first 5 episodes were extremely easy to obtain and are readily available online, thanks to them being widely available when they were released in McDonald's stores. This was the case for all of them except for the last episode, The Legend of McDonald Lock. This is because it was only available on a website called cooltunes.com and had to be purchased online. The marketing for this episode was basically non-existent, and it became one of the earliest known cases of lost media, well before the vast majority of lost media users even knew about lost media's existence, fun fact. Like always, people would come forward claiming they have the tape, and sometimes even actually having the tape, and of course not releasing it. But eventually, time would be in our favor and we would get it uploaded and available online. However, original VHS tapes are still extraordinarily rare and very difficult to come by. So if you do ever see one out in the wild or for sale, it's probably one of your best chances to grab it because they are just extraordinarily hard to get your hands on, and there was a reason it was a case of lost media for a very long time. Another personal favorite McDonald's lost media case of mine is Ronald McDonald and the Adventure Machine. In 1987, they released an 8-minute video called Ronald McDonald and the Adventure Machine and was only available for viewing at birthday parties at what is called, I hope I'm not butchering this, the titular restaurant. Not much was really known about it, and it was kind of impossible to get your hands on because it was allegedly locked by the McDonald's Corporation with no way to access it. But in 2011, a YouTuber named Owens FilmSync uploaded it to YouTube, and this was later discovered in 2019 and has since been available on YouTube and re-uploaded on Internet Archive for extra security. These are only 2 examples of the many cases of McDonald's lost media. And if you're curious and want to go into a lost media rabbit hole of McDonald's lost media, I'll link some videos in the description below. Because now it's time to talk about the newly found district manager tapes. Now, before we move on, I want to answer the question, how did I actually come across or acquire these tapes? You see, the eBay seller who sold me these tapes got them from a estate sale from an ex-McDonald's district manager. There was even some official artwork and a couple other interesting items that he was able to come across after this estate sale, making pretty much all of these tapes corporate and not intended for the public or release in any shape or form. Now, what are we waiting for? Let's take a look. The first tape we're going to talk about is Smile and Say Cheeseburger. Not much is specifically known about this tape, but it's about the magical word Cheeseburger, which throughout the show makes certain magic tricks work properly. There are quite a few tricks and gadgets throughout the show. One is this weird freaky camera prop, which breaks throughout its time on the stage. The next is this crayon trick he does, where he puts a giant crayon into a tube, which is supposed to come out a different color, but only when they say the word cheeseburger does it actually change color. Overall, definitely one of the better ones when it comes to the sheer performance. And if I was one of those corporate McDonald's overlords, I would definitely be pleased with this one. The next tape we're going to talk about is You're the Star. Ronald goes to a elementary school, and Ronald finds a group of kids. He picks who he thinks will be famous people in the future. Ronald performs various gags with the audience with silly versions of everyday items like swirly pencils, and a camera that breaks and shoots snakes out. He then interacts with a dragon puppet which appears on a CRT/VHS, and quite a few things happen. The puppet dragon on the VCR low-key hates itself and thinks it's not special or talented in any shape or form, which Ronald tries his best to reassure that being different is not a bad thing. It can make you unique in cool and interesting ways. Interestingly, the eBay seller had a interesting little photo he sent me, which was a pamphlet for this specific tape, which featured things like a synopsis for the movie, the year this took place, and some other interesting pieces of trivia, which I will have on the screen here. Overall, another very interesting and kind of eerie tape at the same time, although very unintentional, of course. Before we move on, I want to bring up an interesting question. You see, if you're curious how Ronald is talking to a dragon on a TV screen, it is because he is but performing and timing his performance the same time a VHS tape is playing. So the question I had for quite a bit of time is there a existing tape of the dragon tape, with it just standing there eerily and waiting for you to say something? Don't worry, as we can get back to this in a technical sort of way. Bonus trivia fact about these two tapes: they both end with kind of behind the scenes footage of gaffers/prop masters showing how to actually use all of the props in great detail, which is extremely fascinating. Next up, we have the odd yet fascinating blooper reel. It contains about 90 seconds of behind-the-scenes bloopers of 4 McDonald's commercials. When I first saw these commercials on this tape, I thought they were unreleased commercials, but I was eventually able to find all 4 of these commercials on YouTube in actual live commercial segments, which kind of surprised me because when I looked at a lot of these commercials, I really didn't know what they were trying to sell. Like, they seemed kind of too random and goofy in the sense where, like, with a lot of McDonald's commercials, they actually try to sell something or show off a food product, but here it's like just kind of random mumbo jumbo, so I really don't know what the idea behind these commercials are, but you can check out all of them on YouTube if you're curious. The next tape, Quality Tools and Procedures, was the most difficult to access, and what I mean by that is, well, it had mold when it came to me, which I actually was prepared for ahead of time, as the eBay seller told me this before I ever bought it. So this is not on the seller in any shape or form. What wasn't on the menu for archiving this tape was my original plan to get it cleaned. You see, I used to have someone I would go to get tapes cleaned. However, they no longer were able to do that service, so I had to do it myself. It was really nice to have originally a safety net where I can go to and know that the job will be properly done. However, not having that anymore became a curse, but also a blessing at the same time. Yes, it's a risky procedure and there is a chance I can mess it up, but also it is a learning process and a skill for me to improve as a collector and future archivist. I also got grilled a little bit in the comments of one of my older videos where they were upset over the fact that I didn't really talk about how to properly clean a tape, and I said I went to a specialist. So it looks like I was long overdue for learning how to clean moldy tapes anyways. Unfortunately, the process for me starting the tape cleaning process was a lot more tricky and difficult than I initially planned it to be. And this wasn't exactly due to the fact that I didn't know what I was doing, but rather challenges that were not taken into consideration, we should say. But before even starting to attempt this, I didn't want to do it with the very rare McDonald's tape right away, so I used my most expensive tape, which was Beauty and the Beast. The first thing we needed to figure out was how to open a VHS tape. And it's a pretty simple process, but I goofed it up the first time I did it. But if you're curious how to do it correctly, first look at the back of the VCR and you're going to notice 4 areas where there's screws. You're going to want to unscrew all 5 of these screws. Now here's the most important part, and the part I goofed up the first time doing this. It's taking out the top half of the plastic. If you look at the side on a VCR, you'll notice this line exactly in the center of the tape. This is because the plastic part that holds the tape reels comes in 2 pieces, and you want to take off the top part from the front side, not from the back, which is the mistake I made the first time. To do this, you'll notice this button near where the tape is slightly exposed. You're going to lift that little hatch up and then take it out from that side. That's the easiest and safest way to do it. But how do we actually clean the mold off of the tape itself? I wish I could give you a clear-cut answer, but it's surprisingly ambiguous with this part here. There's a lot of ways to do it, but none of them seem to be the most reliable and or consistent from the research I've seen. Everyone kind of has their own specific method, but the most common 2 are either A, putting it in the VCR and cleaning it with a rubbing alcohol cloth while the tape is playing, or being fast forwarded, which is what people do in most cases. But I've yet to try that. That just seems incredibly risky. There's also some VCR cleaner machines. I tried a 3D printed VCR tape cleaner and it ended up in complete disaster. The tapes went all over the place and the motors were just way too fast. And worst of all, one of the motor sides completely just popped off, and when it was spinning, it didn't spin in a perfect straight line. It kind of wobbled a lot. I'll show you here. Now, I'm really glad I did not try this with the actual McDonald's tape for the first time, because this would have been a complete and total disaster. And when we were trying to mess around with this device, we were able to put the tape back in properly. However, we put it in backwards. So I actually had to go back and rewind it all out and put it back in. Unfortunately, the tape did get a bit damaged, but we were able to rewind it back in properly. So this machine was not the most reliable method, and I really wouldn't recommend these 3D printed machines unless the technology gets better for it. I do believe in the future we're gonna have much better ways to clean these tapes. I do know there are rather expensive machines where you just put the tape in and auto cleans it, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, right now either it's really expensive or just kind of YOLO risky. So hopefully in the future that will change and be much more easy and reliable with time. Unfortunately, I couldn't even get to the McDonald's tape because there was one extra problem that we almost had turned into a tragedy, which is on the McDonald's Coca-Cola safety machine training video. And the problem was that the sticker on the front of the tape, if the tape was to be taken out, we would be ripping this sticker in half. I do have a couple options to remedy this issue. I have just yet to decide which option to do to clean this properly, but rest assured, this will be cleaned and digitized properly. I think it's an inevitable process I have had to learn eventually. I just kind of delayed the inevitable for quite some time. So while I unfortunately had to wait longer to figure out what was on this safety procedure tape, another tape came in the mail, which was one I purchased after my first bundled round. And this one was very fascinating. When I first purchased this tape, I knew there was an alien puppet scene, thanks to the eBay screenshot. But there was something I wasn't anticipating. If you remember when I talked about the You're the Star Field Ronald performance, there was a Dragon VHS tape which was basically just a tape of the dragon character moving around, waiting for Ronald McDonald to speak. This means there is a elusive tape of the dragon speaking and standing there creepily looking at the crowd and McDonald, waiting for him to perform and say his lines. This would be a grail if it were to be obtained. However, something with this tape was rather interesting. When the tape started, it started with the really creepy color scheme test. This is what is used kind of test the video settings and make sure everything's working. On a regular VHS release to the public, this will typically be a kind of 40 seconds of black screen. It is very rare and unprofessional to have a tape have something start on the first kind of frame or two of a VHS tape. While it was definitely a jump scare, it was surprisingly something I was a little bit anticipating for, just because a lot of this stuff was already unreleased to the public, and unreleased stuff will typically have weirdo stuff like this on it. However, there was something else I wasn't ready for, which took me a moment to realize. When the tape started, it just pretty much started with these weird, creepy, low CGI musical notes playing on the screen. And at first I thought maybe this was an intro to show off Ronald McDonald performing one of his shows. However, while me and my dad were watching it, we noticed something not only interesting but wildly bizarre. And it was this musical note segment just kept playing for like a really long period of time, for like minutes. And it felt like, wow, is this the world's longest intro ever? And then it hit us. The crazy realization that maybe this wasn't like the classic tapes that we've been watching, where it's a Ronald performing a live recorded show, but rather one of the prop tapes themselves. To see if our theory was really true, we hit the fast forward button to see how long the music scene really was, because the tape was only 24 minutes long, and it went on for minutes after, and this was fast forward. Eventually, you came up to a questionnaire screen, which basically had questions about the environment, and there was 3 multiple choice answers, 2 of them being painfully not the answer, and 1 obviously being the answer. But you see, I knew there was a jump scare coming, and when I realized this was a prop tape, I knew we were in for a very interesting surprise. That surprise being an alien puppet greeting me and my father, looking at us in these big crazy eyes and just having awkward moments of silence. This truly was one of those long lost prop tapes I have been drooling over ever since the start of this journey, and it was right there. I could not believe it, and I actually had chills watching it, because it just felt so off and weird to have this weird alien puppet standing there for seconds on end at times, just eerily looking at you and then yapping about something completely random about the environment. Just keep in mind, Ronald McDonald is supposed to be talking to the alien, hence the random gaps of him speaking at all. And speaking of Ronald, what really jump scared that frick out of me were these wacky moments in the tape where Ronald would just appear out of fucking nowhere. Like, take a look at this shit.
I'm here! Behind you, Ronald!
Yeah, what the fuck is going on here? So, for those of you who don't understand why Ronald just appears out of nowhere and starts looking like his back of his head is like doing this weird thing, basically, Ronald would be interacting with the tape at this time. There are segments where the Ronald performer will put his hand behind the TV, and it looks like he's reaching and interacting with the character IRL. This was supposed to be an example of that, along with this and this. Now, here's where things get interesting. We have the extremely rare, if not rarer, prop tape, but the question remains, if there was a prop VHS tape made for a specific show, that also means there is highly likely to be a recorded actual show where this tape is used as a prop, which is kind of fascinating considering with the previous tape we have the show one but not the prop one. Now in this case, it's the other way around, which creates an even bigger rabbit hole mindfuck, if you ask me. When I received the tapes and digitized them, I was at a crossroads. One part of me could have ended the journey right here and just called it a day. But while making it, I ended up with more questions than answers, as there was so much going on here and so much undocumented things, and almost became too hard to pass up just calling it a day here, as my curiosity really got the best of me. Questions like, who is this for? What was the idea behind any of these tapes at all? And even more interestingly, do things like the Dragon VHS tape in You're the Star exist? What about any of the props? Do any of those still exist? There was too much going on for me not to think about these questions. So the curiosity got the best of me, and I ended up